Hey guys, it's Eking-san. Today I'm excited to chat with ErgoDoctorHawk about the upcoming EU4 patch, titled Leviathan, which releases April 27th. Let's get into it. So you compiled quite a list of things that they're changing.
Yeah, no, I spent quite a bit of time. It feels.
How much time did you spend on that? This is like, hold on, I can get a word count on this. But it's like several pages long. I feel like it's like a solid 1,400 words that you wrote out. So did you excerpt this from the patch notes, or is this just directly copied?
They do dev diaries, and there's a good 30 of them for this patch that's coming. And I basically just went through them and tried to summarize as succinctly as I could.
Wow, that's awesome. Actually, we should share this. So we'll somehow link to it in the description below. So there were a lot of things that jumped out to me. But maybe you can pick out if there's something in particular that you're excited about.
Well, I'm excited about a few things. One in particular, you may or may not know this about me, but I love having choke points. And so whenever they're adding impassable terrain, like mountain chains, that always makes me very happy, because then you can more control the flow of soldiers and combat and stuff, and you can kind of plan that better than just, it's wide open with a bunch of provinces nearby. Right.
Yeah, I noticed that they changed a lot of the terrain to have impassable barriers in a lot of areas.
Yeah, so the Annam Cordillera mountain chain on the west side of Vietnam is now impassable. The central chunk of the island of Sumatra, which is south of the Malaysian peninsula, is also impassable. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it sounds like a big change. I assume it'll affect the strategy surrounding how you invade those areas or get through them during wars.
Yeah, you won't be able to walk around the enemy as much. Yeah. You either go through them or around them via boat.
Right. And on that note, there were also some changes with regards to some of the coastal play, and then also, I guess, some of the inner water status for those.
Yes.
Maybe you can elaborate more.
So basically, around Indonesia, the Philippines, Australasia area, a lot of those sea tiles are now considered inland sea, which basically what that means is that galleys get a boost to their combat in inland sea tiles. Similar to basically the Mediterranean, the Black Sea, the Baltic, those kind of places. They've added that same thing around there, so galleys are a lot more beneficial. But beyond that, specifically, they actually buffed galleys quite a bit by having their engagement width, which is kind of like combat width, but for boats.
Oh.
So you'll be able to have twice as many galleys engage in a fight as previous.
Oh, wow. So are galleys now more strategic than they used to be? I usually just build a ton of light ships, for better or worse. Do you think that strategy could change?
Quite possibly. It's a huge buff, from what I can tell, in regards to galley combat, because, like I said, that's double the amount of galleys you can have in a combat of whatever width.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
And now there are more areas in which they also get, on top of that, a buff to their combat score, or whatever it is, with the inland sea tiles.
So especially in the Southeast Asia or Indonesia area, galley combat may be a big part of playing in that region.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you'll have to really make sure that you have a decent galley navy put together in order to fuck them up.
Right. Also related to that, I noticed in the Americas that there were some changes to the Native American galleys as well, or that there's a new watercraft unit.
So in the game as it currently stands, in 1.30 and previous, native nations that have not yet reformed or westernized, as it used to be called, they don't have any boats at all.
Wow.
I know, right? It's a little absurd. So they're like, okay, we'll give them war canoes, which are essentially a transport ship, but they are 1/3 as powerful as a normal cog.
I saw that. So are they also 1/3 the cost?
I don't know. It didn't necessarily specify in the dev diaries.
Because that kind of sucks if they're, weaker and the same cost, then it really doesn't make sense. I mean, it's better than nothing, I guess.
It is better than nothing. Of course, the thing with the natives is that there's supposed to be a representation of the tech differential.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I get that. But so the game is obviously historical in many ways, but you can also play it to be ahistorical. So I imagine if you're a native nation that survived until the 1800s and you fought off all the European colonialization, then I would think that if you're being ahistorical already, you should be able to have ships.
Well, and that's the thing, is this is only a limit for natives until they reform.
Got it.
There's a process by which, as you become familiar with the Europeans, you can basically bootstrap onto them and get their technology and stuff. And then you'll basically be just like them in regards to being able to build whatever kind of boats you want.
Okay, got it.
So it's basically just up until the point where you've reformed, you have war canoes.
Oh, okay. Then that makes sense. I've never played... I mean, I noticed there were other changes to playing as an indigenous nation. I've never played those before because the game just didn't make it very interesting to play as them.
No, there's a lot of wait around and see.
Yeah, so hopefully some of these things stick away from it, because I also saw that there's like an indigenous nation idea group that sounds interesting.
Oh yeah, let's talk about ideas. In the base game, you have these idea groups. I think it's something like 6 to 8 per category. So you have like 6 admin, 6 diplo, and 6 military idea groups. One of those, I believe it's under admin, is aristocratic ideas and plutocratic ideas.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they had before. And so if you were a republic, it would replace that idea group with plutocratic ideas. And if you were a monarchy or literally anything else, you had the aristocratic ideas. But now, they have added in 3 new idea groups for that kind of rotating idea group. The tribal hordes of the steppes and whatnot, they're getting their own horde ideas. You have theocratic divine ideas, and then also indigenous ideas for Native American governments. They've added these 3 new idea groups that kind of rotate in based on what your government type is.
It's exciting to see that the game is moving into these areas that didn't have much attention before, and that they're making them interesting to play now.
Yeah, they're focusing more and more on the rest of the world, which is really exciting, because, Europe's great, and of course that's, the namesake, Europa Universalis 4.
Yeah.
But it's really nice to be able to play in other parts of the world and actually have fleshed out, flavorful, interesting stories to be told and, history to delve into.
Oh, for sure. I mean, as an American, I find the idea of playing as a Native American really interesting, and seeing more or playing through before the Europeans arrived and just messing with that alternate history, I think could be really fun.
Oh yeah, and there are quite a few lovely achievements for playing as Native Americans. There's the No Trail of Tears achievement, which is basically as the Cherokee destroy the Europeans or whatever.
That's cool.
And then there's one for the Aztecs, which is actually a callback to Crusader Kings 2. There was a Sunset Invasion DLC, which basically had in the 1300s, what if the North Americans managed to get essentially 1500s ship tech, and so the Aztecs show up in Europe. There's an achievement called Sunset Invasion where you have to take London and Paris and other stuff like that.
Oh, that's cool. That sounds like a really interesting achievement to get. Let me ask you, related to achievements, this is probably a dumb question for me, but do they usually also add new achievements when these updates come out?
Yes.
Are they all related to the things they've added here?
Typically speaking, yes. A lot of them will be related to mechanics that have been added, or related to an area that they're focusing on.
Got it. Another thing that jumped out to me from your list, I see that they're adding a list of interesting nations to play as.
That list I compiled.
Okay.
As possible nations that you and I should play in our EU4 campaign on this patch.
Yeah, that sounds really good. I like it. Especially the first one, Ayutthaya. is something that seemed interesting to play as before. And so it sounds like it's gonna be even more interesting with all of these changes. So another thing that jumped out to me were the monuments feature that they're adding. Like, this sounds really cool to me. I used to play a game called Empire Earth. I don't know if you ever played that, but it had Wonders of the World.
I have played that. That is a very classic game.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that game. And it had Wonders of the World that cost a lot to build, but had certain perks if you had them. And so this sounds really interesting to me. I love the idea of having a cool monument that you can show off and then going after other countries' monuments.
Yeah. They give really, really good buffs depending on, what tier they're at. They can be 0 to 4-0, basically being, non-built / destroyed. And then it gets better as you upgrade it more and more.
Yeah, and I saw that they have a lot of things surrounding these, and they're not easy tiers to get. You put here that they cost 1,000 gold and take 50 years to complete, and you can, of course, speed that up. But I assume if they cost that much, they must have some pretty cool perks. And I know that you also mentioned that there are some missions that are linked to owning or upgrading monuments.
Yeah, so I believe one of the missions for one of the nations in Southeast Asia, one of their missions is that you need to own a certain monument and basically get it upgraded to the max tier in order to accomplish said mission and get whatever bonuses are off of that. But yeah, basically each of these wonders, these monuments, have different effects, and also they have different certain requirements for even if you can utilize them. Like, not all of them, but some of them, if you're not the right culture or you're not the right religion, they won't really give you much. But I believe quite a few of them, it's just you have to hold that land and you got it, and it'll be fine, kind of thing.
Okay.
But I think what's more interesting is that they're shifting canals over to this monument system.
So I never used canals, or maybe I did and didn't realize it. Can you describe what that is?
You have 3 canals that you can build in EU4. I think only one of which was actually potentially built in the entire time span of this game. The other 2 were built after. The Panama, the Suez, those 2 were built after the time period.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
But then you have the Kiel Canal up in Denmark, connecting the Baltic Sea to the North Sea.
Oh, cool. So these are going to become monuments now.
Yes, they're based on the same mechanic where you have these 3 tiers, and as they go up in tier, you get more trade power. It's pretty nice, and most importantly, and I'm really excited about this, and it is a little more ahistorical, because like I said, Panama and the Suez Canal are outside of this time period, but you can now build the canal starting in Admin Tech 22 instead of 26.
Okay. So even earlier.
Yeah, but it makes them more impactful in the game, which I enjoy. As a EU4 player, I don't really demand historical accuracy all the time. It's a historical simulator that allows you to split off and do whatever crazy nonsense you want to do.
Yeah, that seems like a weird demand to want that.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who are pissy all the time about how ahistorical EU4 is sometimes.
Well, I guess there's are always haters. Haters gonna hate. But another thing that jumped out to me, sorry to change subjects, but is the quality of life improvements in this. So at least for me, as someone that's not having 1,000 hours or 2,000 hours of experience, only having about 100 hours, you've heard me rant all the time about stuff on the screen in the game, and that for me, it's really easy to lose track of priorities. And it sounds like they're implementing some cool features to help players like me react to more important things, like an alert for inactive merchants, alert for when coasts are being invaded, and highlighting locations of revolt risk on the map in the stability view.
Yeah, those are all pretty nice. And then the other one, which I actually assume you don't actually understand what this is. So there will now be a never mothball checkbox in the province menu for a fort.
You thought right. Can you, please explain.
The thing is that there is, I think it's under the military tab, that there's a button you can press which basically says mothball all forts. So now you can check box and say never mothball this fort, and then when you mothball all of them, it just mothballs the ones that don't have that checked.
Oh, cool. So like when we were just playing the other day, I would mothball my forts to save money, but there might be some that are near a hostile country that I don't want to mothball. So I could check that box, and then they would not be mothballed even when I would mothball everything else. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and then you can just press one button to mothball all of the forts you don't need, and leaving the ones that you do want.
But that's really cool. I definitely like this stuff, and that they keep improving the game, making it more playable, and having fewer clicks and less to worry about.
Right on. My my roommate decided to jump in and provide apparently some information.
Oh yeah.
Apparently, in the 1500s, the Ottomans attempted to build the Suez Canal and failed.
Oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was just too expensive, apparently. It could have been done, I guess. It probably would have been even more costly and, like, deathly for the workers as the other two, like the Panama. There's so much people died building that.
Yeah. I was going to say, can you attempt to build it that early in this game? I assume not, right? That's a very late achievement.
So there's a total of 33 levels of tech, and they're now setting it to tech 22, so about 2/3 into the game.
Yeah, if the game starts at 1400 and ends in the 1800s, then yeah, 2/3 is not going to be 1500s. But that's really interesting. I didn't know that about the Ottomans. Let's see, another thing that jumped out to me from your list was diplomacy, and that they added several new features. A lot of this seems to be surrounding favors, and that you can use them for ducats, soldiers, sailors, and some other things. But one thing isn't clear to me. Is it that any of these favor manipulations reduce your stability? Because that sounds pretty painful.
No. There's a small amount of controversy on the forums regarding these features. But let's talk about the good, in my opinion. So back in the release of the Cossacks, one of the expansions a while back, they introduced this concept of favors, which basically it was a new way to call in people to your war. You had to have favors with them or else they wouldn't do it. And basically the way it works is whenever you're allied with somebody, you slowly accrue favors over time. In the game as it is now, you can do three things. You can call people into war. You can tell them to prepare for war, which means they're more likely to accept in the future. But also they themselves will not declare their own war within the next year. And then the other thing is you can spend favors to increase trust. So those three exist now. And there's a complaint about EU4 that a lot of people have with their DLC policy is that they introduce features and then like just kind of never expand on them. But thankfully, with this release, they're adding all of these new things to the favor system, like making it much more fleshed out and interesting, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've noticed that when playing EU4 is that I would have favors and no idea what to do with them, but I would run low on, ducats, soldiers, and other things. So this is really nice. That's another way that you can curry favors, which looks like a new thing that you can do, but like use those favors for something useful.
Yeah. So the new diplomatic action curry favors is basically anyone that you're like reasonably well off with, like they don't hate you essentially. You can send a diplomat to basically just slowly build up favors. It doesn't have to be with somebody you've allied. But if you're not allied or you stop currying favors, you lose it over time, any favors that you have. And diplomatic reputation affects how fast you gain those favors. So, as you mentioned, you can now trade favors for ducats, soldiers, sailors. You can basically tell somebody else to hate a third-party country for some favors. The one that I'm pretty excited about, you can be like, hey, you hold this province that's my core. I demand it.
Nice. Yeah, I did notice that core feature, yeah.
Yeah, you can break alliances. You can place your own heir on somebody else's throne if you have enough favors and they don't have an heir. So the thing I mentioned here where it says the stab hit is the AI will use this on occasion. They will send you a thing and they'll say, hey, I'm going to spend these favors. I want ducats, soldiers, whatever. You can decline, but you lose a stability.
Oh, because you owe them favors.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Marginally. People are pretty pissy on the boards. And I kind of agree with them. I think what it should do is you should lose prestige, you should lose diplomatic reputation, you should maybe lose diplo points, but it makes very little sense to me that it would affect the overall stability of your nation for you to decline another country's request.
That's fair. Yeah, I can see your argument there. I was thinking that there should be some repercussion for turning it down, because like you made an agreement that you owe them later, basically. Like that's what a favor means. So
Oh, absolutely. And I agree that there need to be consequences, and they can be strong consequences. But stab just makes no sense to me as far as a consequence.
yeah, I see what you mean. It should be a major diplomatic loss, because you are violating your diplomatic relationship.
Exactly.
So those were the things that jumped out to me. There were 5 or so major groupings, but there's a lot in your list. So I wasn't sure if there's anything else that you wanted to describe or talk about or that jumped out to you.
Sure. So one thing that really stands out to me that I'm excited about is their introduction of new playing tall mechanics.
Yeah, can you explain that?
So playing tall is where you don't take land. You just kind of stick in your own area and just build up and have like really rich land that you do hold.
Okay, that's one thing I've wanted to do, but it always feels like it's far more lucrative to expand and take resources and loot other people.
Yes, no, nine times out of 10, it's usually much more useful to take land and expand your territories than it is to do almost anything else. Which is why they're now adding more features, thankfully. As it stands, depending on, I think it's every 5 development that you have, you get, by default, a building slot.
Oh, okay.
But, you can only go so high up in development before it costs an exorbitant amount of points to increase. So you won't be able to build certain buildings that you want. But, let's say you are a small nation and you don't want to actually expand out, you just want to make your own area better. There's now a feature where for every 15 development in a province, you can press this button, build infrastructure, that gives you a new building slot. It does increase your governing capacity use by 200, which is, quite a bit. But if you're not expanding anywhere else, then it doesn't really matter. You're not using that capacity anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it'll allow you to build up more. I mean, you can add more buildings on limited provinces this way.
Yeah, so you can have, essentially all the buildings you want.
Yeah.
Because it's fairly easy-ish to get a province up to, 50 development. You won't get many in the course of a game, usually, but, it's pretty possible to do that. So, having, 2 or 3 new building slots for every one that you hold, that's pretty good. So that's the thing I'm looking forward to. There's also the concept of concentrating development in your territories or your subject land. Basically what that does is you choose an area and you say, I'm stealing development from this and I'm redistributing it. Territories, if you've forgotten, are not fully integrated provinces. Mm-hmm. So they don't really give you much. The autonomy in territories is 90%.
Right.
So you only get 10% of whatever the development there puts out. And so what this can do is you click an area and you take, I don't know the exact amount, but some amount, say 5 or 10 development from that area. And it shifts 50% of it to your capital, 30% to other stated areas that you have that are actually integrated, and then 20% is lost. So it's an interesting way to basically be all right, I'm going to take this land, I have these territories, I'm going to steal all this development, and then I'll just give it back to the enemy. Whatevs. I don't want it.
That's really interesting. But yeah, now you can take development, is what you're saying.
And also, what's really exciting is this peace treaty option, pillage capital, where you basically steal development from their capital state and distribute it to your country, similar to when you concentrate development. So, you go to war against a bunch of people, and then you separate piece each of them out and be pillage, 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 and you gain 20 development or something in your capital.
That sounds really nice, because that's, in the long term, development will probably pay out more than some ducats that you get from a war.
Oh, for sure. You can also, if you're having issues with money, let's say you're focused in Russia, but you have territory way down in Iberia. Because it's so far away, it costs more and more ducats to administer. What you can now do is spend 100 government reform points, and I think it's halving that administration cost in that area.
Oh, okay.
If it's a very, very valuable area, but it costs too much to administer just because it's far away, you can basically be no. This is an important area for the core of my nation, and so you can make it cheaper, the administration cost.
Oh, that's really interesting. And how do you do that again? There's a new ability to do this?
Yeah, there's a centralizing state ability that you spend government reform points to do, and it takes 5 years to complete the process, and then basically it, I believe, halves, so you save half of the ducats that are spent normally on a state that's very far away.
Very cool. You have a section on Navy that I see. I need to learn more about playing with navies, like naval combat and naval investment management, but could you summarize some of the interesting changes?
Sure. The first thing is that development gives more sailors. The amount of sailors has doubled per development from 30 to 60.
Wow.
As tech continues from the beginning of the game to the late game, as the ships get bigger and badder and more awesome, they require more sailors to run. As I had mentioned, the engagement of galleys has been halved, which is exciting, dramatically improving galley usefulness in almost any situation. So I have this listed because it was in the thing. Ship cost and speed will increase with tech, but ship cost already increased with tech. Like, that was already a thing. But speed, I don't think it did. So later ships will be faster.
Oh, cool. Well, that'll make the game really that'll make the world feel smaller. So it'll make the game feel more dynamic.
Yeah, and I think it's like, at most, 50% faster from the beginning to the end of the game. But, it's a little bit. It's something.
I mean, that's a sizable increase.
Yeah. One thing that I'm pretty excited about, because oftentimes when I'm playing this game, if I'm not like a focused naval power, I never have admirals, like ever. Because those slots are better used for generals.
Sure, yeah.
But now they've split up the leader pools. So now there is an army leader pool and a navy leader pool. And so you can have like 2 generals and 2 admirals. And also, when you go over leaders, before, when you went over in leaders, you would lose a military point every leader you were over.
Right.
Now, only the army does that. The navy now loses diplo points if you're over in the naval leaders.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So, you can kind of space out the cost.
Yeah, and that could be some interesting strategy in itself as to whether you go hard on navy or army or both.
Yeah. One thing they're changing is the liberty desire of colonial nations. They actually now consider naval strength. They didn't previously. So, like, if you were the British and you had a shite army, which traditionally, yes, but you have a really good navy, they didn't care about that prior. They were like, whatever. But now it matters quite a bit, apparently, or at least to some extent. I think, is that their last update or the previous, they introduced Marines, which are basically just special infantry units that can land on coasts faster.
Okay.
Essentially. Like, that's pretty much all they can do. But they take, like, a bunch more shock damage than, normal infantry. And they've reduced that by half, I believe. So, Marines are slightly more useful.
Yeah, I never used the Marines. How long ago did they add them?
Like I said, either a patch or 2 ago, I'm not sure.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's some exciting naval and also not just on the offensive side, but the defensive side as well with this new patch.
One thing I'm kind of excited about, actually, is they're making some changes to religion in this coming patch. So prior to this patch, Zoroastrianism and Sikhism really didn't have any mechanics. They basically copied the Coptic mechanics. I don't think you've probably never played any Coptic nations, have you?
I have not.
So basically, Coptic Christian nations, typically like Ethiopia, there are 5 holy sites, essentially, that you need to obtain. And as you control them, either yourself or another Coptic nation, you get bonuses that you can take. And it's the same thing. There are 5 fire temples of Zoroastrianism that must be rekindled, because at this point in history, there's practically, like, there's very few Zoroastrians, at least very few in power. Like, there's no Zoroastrian nation. But there are Zoroastrian provinces within certain nations in, the Middle East, Iran kind of area.
Yeah.
So, it adds more interesting stuff. And there are a few achievements, actually, related to Zoroastrianism and rekindling the temples. So, this should hopefully make it more interesting and more, easy, hopefully.
Yeah, I hope so. It sounds interesting. The religious aspect of the game is something I've kind of played around with, but it is definitely something I need to learn. Sounds like it's getting more complicated, but more interesting. So you'll have to teach me more.
Absolutely. I'm glad that they're fleshing out more and more of the religions, because before this, basically Zoroastrianism, totemism, Judaism, etc., all of these religions, they just have two standard buffs. If you're part of this religion, you get this and this. And, like, that's it. There are no mechanics surrounding it. Whereas, you know, like Catholicism, you have the papacy. Like, all of the other religions have interesting mechanics. And now they're adding them to these. So the next one is Sikhism. Basically, over time, relative to when they showed up historically, Sikh gurus will appear. And you can pick from one of 3 teachings while they're alive. And I think you can switch them like every 5 years. But when they die, whatever you last chose, it becomes permanent as a bonus. And you can have up to 6 teachings. Each time you get it, though, you lose 1 missionary strength. So you won't be able to convert provinces as easily.
Wait, a missionary strength, not a missionary, right?
No, missionary strength. So it'll be harder and harder to convert other provinces over to Sikhism.
Okay. But you get a permanent benefit at the cost of a permanent loss in missionary strength.
Yeah. So, you know, you'd probably take, like, religious ideas to counterbalance it, if you wanted to. Although, you can also just play, like, tall. And be like, why would I bother invading and converting people? I can just chill out in the mountains.
Yeah. So that's cool. You can see how those new gameplay elements kind of come together there.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. So then there's totemism, which is essentially the North American broad category for religion. At least everything north of Mexico. And the way it works is, as you play, when your rulers die, you can potentially mythifize them, and they become a part of the overall story of your culture. And what will happen is your rulers have traits when they're alive. You know, like, oh, this guy's really good at constructing, so it's cheaper construction cost. Or this person's really zealous, so there's more missionary strength. And if you choose to not necessarily deify, but honor that leader and add them to the mythos, then you get basically a version of that trait permanently.
Oh, okay. Nice.
And you can do this up to 10 times.
Wow. Okay.
And then they're adding a new religion, Alcharinga, or Dreamtime, the Aboriginal Australian religion.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, because they're actually adding nations into Aboriginal Australia. But it's pretty similar to the fetishist cult system, which you've probably not actually seen either, which is basically, as you come into contact with more and more religions, every leader can choose a different thing, and you get access to more, like, bonuses. Like, when your leader dies, you're like, oh, I can now choose among this list. And the more religious stuff you come into contact with, the more options you have. With this, though, in the dev diary, it said something about it being unlocked via mission tree, so we'll see how that works.
Well, but it's cool to see that they're adding more in Australia also, because I've had the feeling that Australia didn't have too much to do either.
No, Australia had no nations at all prior to this. Neither did New Zealand. But now New Zealand has sets of the Maori tribes, which is quite exciting. If you've ever seen Moana.
I have not. It's on my list.
Oh, it's great. But yeah, the Maori or the Maori, they're showing up now. Hawaii now has kingdoms.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, the last thing is just they've kind of revamped, generally speaking, the federation mechanics for North American nations and some other stuff to native things in America, which is nice. It's exciting to see more of that fleshed out. But I don't know, I figure we can talk about that at a later time when we're actually going to play in that area.
Yeah, it'll be really cool to play with this new patch, and then we can kind of come back after we've played some and talk about what kind of features that we've liked. We might not play in the Americas anytime soon, but eventually maybe it'd be worth trying out.
Yeah, once you become a bit more experienced and can handle harder starts, because it is a lot harder to start in the Americas.
Yeah, although as hard as I try, you'll still have to carry this team. I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, I'll see what I can do. The last thing to note, for anyone who's listening and would like to help us decide, is that there's a lovely list of nations that I've compiled that we'll have to put in the description that are interesting to play in this new patch. So let us know on this video or in our lovely Discord what nations you think we should play when this patch drops.
Yeah, I'd love to hear people's thoughts about anything we've talked about here, and starting nations or just nations that you'd like to see us play. So yeah, if you want, leave a comment down below. There'll also be a link to the Discord, and we also stream every Wednesday night, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern. So you can come and check it out. All right, well, thanks a lot, Ergo. This has been really awesome to get your perspective and your compilation of the updates that are coming. As a newbie, relative newbie, this is all a lot to take in, but I'm always excited to see the game getting better and better and better.
Right.
And I love hearing your excitement, because I can tell that you're genuinely looking very forward to seeing this drop.
Oh yeah, no, there are definitely a few features in this coming patch that I'm really excited about, so.
Awesome. There you go, guys. Please let us know what you think, and come hang out with us. It'd be really great. Anyway, thanks for hanging out, guys, and we'll see you next time. Peace.
See y'all in the next one.